Our family's been in this valley since the 1800s, brought into the area, and I'm now one of the 5th generation farmers on this property.
My family have been here for generations. They were some of the first settlers in this area. They came out from Cornwall for the gold.
Although we've been here for many generations, the Barkers have been here a lot longer.
Fellow feeling with the Barkers, because they've been here a lot longer than we have, and yet just for the generations that have been here, we feel a real bond with the land.
Some of it was selected from the government, and as a condition of that selection, you had to clear a certain amount each year so that you could retain the land.
My name is Betty Barker, and I'm a local resident near Beechworth in northeast Victoria. My ancestors, the Barkers, have lived here in and around the Chiltern-Mt Pilot National Park for generations.
Hi, my name is Lexi and I live in Wiradjuri, that's around Beechworth. I like living here because there's a lot of native animals. A special thing about this area would be probably the environment that is around here.
We've seen a lot of changes over the years. We were here when the gold miners first moved into the area. Let me tell you a story, my story. This episode begins one evening just like many others. The sun had just set and there was still some colour in the sky. My partner Todd and I were just getting ready to go out as usual. But suddenly we heard the sound of intruders. We dashed back and forth, trying to locate where the sound was coming from, and suddenly...
Draw up! We've got it!
I didn't know what had hit me. I struggled a bit, and there was some kind of thing put over my head. There was slight pressure on my back. It's really all a bit of a blur. I know that later that night I managed to escape. What a night. Exactly the same thing happened to my partner Todd that night. We didn't realise until later that we were both wearing something pretty high-tech on our backs. It was pretty small, really, and we both got used to it.
My research on barking owls was for a PhD through Charles Sturt University. I chose to work on barking owls because they're endangered in Victoria. We think that they're threatened because of habitat fragmentation, which in this area occurred as early as the gold rush, and clearing of previously forested areas for farming. I was investigating habitat use by barking owls. By that I mean I was looking at what areas of bush the owls actually used for nesting and for hunting. So essentially, how much and what type of environments were they using? are you, Betty? I know you're around here somewhere.
That's her, the blipster. After that fateful night, everything went back to normal except for her, the blipster. She seemed to follow us everywhere.
I can hear you, Betty. You can't be too far away. Signal's strong. I was able to follow these owls around by attaching radio transmitters to them. But first, I had to catch them. I caught them using really large nets, and I got them to come into the nets by doing audio playback, which means I played calls of other barking owls to them, and they came in. I draw them into the net using these calls because they're really territorial, and they become blind with fury, so they don't pay attention to the fact that there might be a net in the way. Once I've caught them, I attach the radio transmitters. The radio transmitter's attached to their back, and they wear it like a tiny little backpack harness. So the transmitter's very light, and once they're wearing it, I work it in under the feathers so you can't see it at all. You'd never know they had it on unless you actually had them in the hand. So once I have the radio transmitter on the owl, I follow them around at night and find out where they go. But the idea is to stay far enough away from the owl so that you're following them rather than chasing them. Because the owls do most of their hunting at night and move around most of the night, and because I wanted to find out where they hunted, I had to adopt owl hours, which meant that I became completely nocturnal. And you're at a big disadvantage because you don't have the night vision that they have. And of course you're trying to be really quiet when you're following the owls, but it's very difficult to be unobtrusive at night.
To be unobtrusive at night? Hey, watch this.
Oh! I'm attached to a plant! Help! Ah! What I have been able to discover from my radio tracking of the owls and following them around at night is that they have very distinct home range boundaries and they tolerate very little overlap with their neighbours. So if they're in their patch, then that's the area they have to work with, and there's no making exploratory forays off into other areas.
Neighbours? Did the blipster say neighbours? Oh, they can be a problem, especially if they happen to be the pals. Powerful owls, that is. That's them. Mum, Dad, and that little fluffy chick.
The powerful owls have come in and kicked out the barking owls from their territory and actually taken over the whole territory.
So that's what happened to our cousins. Kicked out of their territory by a pair of pals. They're bigger than us. We stay well clear of them. And if you think that chick is cute, you should see mine.
The average territory size for a pair of breeding owls is just over 1,400 hectares. So that's larger than the entire urban area of Beechworth.
Todd and I used to live just near Beechworth. Did I tell you about the first time I met Todd? I was a young adult and getting interested in nesting. He was a handsome-looking fellow, sitting in one of the nicest big old red box trees I'd ever seen. He'd been widowed and was looking for a new mate. Todd was not only good looking, but his whole patch was just ideal.
Now the trick for the owls is to defend a patch that's big enough to support their needs from year to year. They need to be able to have sufficient food resources in that patch to breed each year and to keep themselves alive through the changing seasons.
Even though I was only 2, my instincts told me Todd's patch was perfect. It was full of variety, rocky outcrops, farmland, bushland with trees, shrubs and small bushes. Plenty of flowers and nectar available for birds and insects, which are also vital in our diet. There were some open grassy areas with lots of different native grasses, producing seed for many different parrots. Parrots are one of our favourite foods. And there were trees, so many different shapes and sizes and ages, with lots of hollows. Hollows means homes for critters like sugar gliders, squirrel gliders, ringtails and bats. All the things we need to eat. Do you know that it takes more than 100 years for a hollow to form? Critters that we depend on don't just have one home, they are quite into property and move around a lot.
One hollow isn't adequate because they move every few days to make sure that the owls, for instance, don't learn where they're denning and just come and pick them off one by one every night. So they need to move regularly in order to stay one step ahead of the owls.
We always looked forward to the setting of the sun. As darkness fell, our patch would come alive with all sorts of amazing creatures. Oh, we loved the nightlife. We used to call to each other in the night just to touch base while we were out hunting. And at break of day, as we were returning home to our tree, we'd often bark around the edges of our patch, just to remind our neighbours of the boundary line. That was when dear Todd and I were still together. Oh, I would have been happy with him for life.
So because the owls don't recognise human boundaries and they tended to hunt all over the place, that's why permission from landholders to go onto their land to work was so important. Overwhelmingly, the response was really positive and interested in the owls. Most people were fascinated to know that they had barking owls on their land and they wanted to know more about them.
I hadn't even heard of them really before, I heard about barking owls before we met Natasha. We met her in the paddock here and she told us she was doing these studies and we were really excited.
We weren't aware of barking owls. We were aware of owls, but we didn't realise that that barking noise off in the distance wasn't dogs, it was an actual owl barking at us.
I don't understand why people mistake us for dogs. Even dogs mistake us for dogs. Fancy not being able to tell the difference, even with ears like that. Of course, we never mistake dogs for other barking owls.
Heard barking owls in the past, but I've never actually seen one flying around.
I don't know what barking owls are. I've no idea, but I've heard mopoke. Are they similar?
I've never heard one of those barkers. I've never heard a barker before.
be driving through the bush, so you'd hear stuff, but we didn't know much about barking owls at all, no.
I've never seen owls in this area.
We knew that there were things barking. It sounded a little bit like mopokes, but not quite the same. Weren't really sure what they were until Natasha came and spoke to us and asked us if she could study them on the property.
Because I was following the owls at night, I spent a lot of time on the private land, going where the owls went.
The very sparse understory around here makes it a good area for owls to hunt because they can easily see their prey in order to catch it.
Todd and I would go out hunting every night. One of our favourite foods was always a nice chunk of sugar glider. It was always worth the chase.
When they're hunting, they'll grab their prey between their feet, and they have extremely powerful feet, so they'll actually crush their prey if it's big enough that it requires crushing. So barking owls will also hunt on the wing and take insects and even bats in flight, and possibly birds that they may have flushed from a roost. So they're very good acrobats.
We're not only good acrobats, our eyesight is 100 times better than humans. And we can turn our heads right around and see almost a full circle. We could hear the slightest rustle or quiver of a creature up to half a kilometre away. Our ears are lopsided on our heads to help us pinpoint the exact location of the sound. And once we've heard something, well, it's time to check out the possibilities of a snack.
So they're able to swallow really large things, and their very acidic stomach juices do most of the digesting for them. So they don't chew their food, they're gulpers. They swallow large chunks whole, including fur, feathers, you name it.
Oh, you've got to be joking. She's not. She's not. She is. Told you that Blipster does strange things. This time, she's looking at my pellets.
These pellets and whitewash are indicative of an area where you've got an owl roosting above regularly.
Oh, she's picking one up.
And in the pellets, they're regurgitated by the owls, so they actually cough them up. And in the pellets is all the indigestible remains of their prey.
Oh, goodness gracious.
Here we go, here's a tiny claw. It's quite soft from having gone through the stomach of the owl. So there's a little claw. Perhaps even some of these tiny little bones may belong to an antechinus. The yellow-footed antechinus is quite common in this area.
Antechinus. That reminds me of how Todd used to bring me extra special treats to prove his skill in looking after me just before nesting. Oh, and here is my beautiful nest tree. I used to feel so proud of our place. Down in the nest hollow, I would lay 2 or 3 round white eggs. The Blipster can show you what the nest looks like from the inside.
So the owls, as they came into the hollow, this would have been completely enclosed, and they've come down to this base of the hollow material. Now this would have all been packed down to make a horizontal base, and the female just lays her eggs on this crumbly material. It makes a really good, quite a soft base, but most importantly, it drains the water away well. So if the hollow of the tree leaks, the eggs don't end up sitting in water and get chilled.
Pretty clever, eh? Sitting on those eggs for 36 days or so was a full-time occupation, I can tell you. I was totally reliant on Todd to catch all my food, and he was very loyal. During the day, he would keep guard to make sure nothing crept up on the nest. Like a goanna, for instance. I'll never forget the day when the young tawny frogmouth was taken from its nest by a goanna. Their only chick, fully feathered and almost ready to fly, was dragged from its nest and eaten right in front of its father's eyes. These goannas, they can really wreck a nesting season. Todd had to be totally on his guard. A week or two after hatching, our chicks would start coming to the hollow entrance to check out the big, wide world outside. After another week or two, say when they were about a month old, they would leave the nest hollow and perch on a branch nearby. We were never far away, just keeping an eye on them. They were pretty quiet during the day, but at night they drove us mad with their trilling for food, incessant. They might have a bit of a practice fly from one of their nighttime perches to another, but they never went very far. They're not very mobile and not great flyers at first. Oh, sometimes I really worry about what the future holds for our young.
The drought we've had is the worst one that I've ever seen in my lifetime of farming, and it probably, or it would be the worst one that my father's seen as well, so probably the worst for 2 generations.
During my study, I was able to see the effects of drought. At the beginning of my study, we had very good rainfall. Breeding success was very high in the barking owl population of the area. As the drought progressed towards 2003, when it was at its worst, breeding success in the barking owl population declined dramatically, to the point where some breeding pairs I could no longer find in their territories, which may mean that they've died because they can't find enough food.
Oh gee, how I remember the big dry. Todd and I didn't do any nesting that year. We instinctively knew it was just not on. Trees were dying everywhere. Todd and I had a hard enough time finding food to keep ourselves alive. But worse was yet to come.
The fire that came through was one of the worst ones, or the worst one I've ever seen. It started on the hills, or past the hills over there, spotted 7 and 8 k's in advance and went straight through, past our back corner, only 20 metres from the boundary, and continued on towards Wodonga.
Talked about Eldorado. Yeah, I might just add that in the Wodonga case.
It was just dreadful. I don't want to ever see it again. The noise of it was, well, you can only describe it as a freight train coming and exploding high up into the sky with the Murray Pines. It was just scary. we could do about it. There was just nothing we could do. It was just so intense and so hot. You would be taking your life in your own hands to go up into that fire.
Yeah. Some of us didn't have any choice. We were there. We were in it, trying to escape. It was the most traumatic day of our lives. After the fire, it was eerie. The forest was so quiet. Except for the odd creature that had managed to survive, there was little movement. We were in another world, a very black world.
It was about a week after the fires before I could get into the forest, and my priority was to check out what had happened to the owls. Most of those owls I was able to locate. However, Kieran had died and I found him in an ash bed lying face down. He wasn't burnt, but he must have died of smoke inhalation because of where he was. The fire was really hot in that area, and he may have become trapped between the fire fronts and not have been able to fly out.
Poor Kieran. I guess it was a quick death. As for us, well, life slowly got harder and harder. In the first couple of weeks, there were a few prey animals left to hunt, but that only lasted for a week or two, and then they all disappeared. I was totally exhausted, just hunting to stay alive. And Todd, well, he was acting strangely and getting very thin. I think he was letting me have the best hunting grounds while he was getting weaker and weaker. One day, Todd went off hunting and he never returned.
After 3 months, Todd died of starvation, and I was able to find him dead on the ground, and he was very, very skinny, and he'd lost about a third of his body weight.
I'm lonely now. If I wait here long enough, I'm hoping a young male will come along into my patch. I'm hoping he'll notice my beautiful eyes. I'm hoping he'll decide to stay with me so we can raise a family. Well, you've got to be positive at times like this.
With the hollows and that, now that we know about the owls and the anticlinus and bats that use them for homes, and then probably other animals as well, we'll leave them forever and a day.
We didn't know, we didn't realise that we had something so rare in our area. We just considered them owls. Our owls.
I think from the landholder point of view, it's about managing a range of landscape elements on their property. It's about preserving live trees with hollows and dead standing trees, which are also really important. But it's also about adding understory into the remnant bush by allowing some of the wattles, small bushes, grasses and shrubs to develop in treed areas.
Shrub species, all indigenous to this area, brought as much seed from as close as possible to use to re-veg this. Species like the eucalyptus cadens and the barking owl that would have been right through this area, we just feel that if we can be a part of bringing them back to this area, that's going to be really important for the future.
We have certain areas of the farm where we don't cut up anything at all, so even if a big old tree falls, we just leave it there. We don't take any firewood out. Or we're trying to, especially our creek area, we're trying to revegetate that and have it totally set aside for hopefully those sorts of rare animals to find somewhere to live.
Yes, that's just what we need. Creek lines are fantastic hunting grounds for us. And if landholders plant understory, it supports even more animals and more little birds and insects for us to hunt. Even the single paddock trees are important, especially in summer. We use these as a base to hunt insects like Christmas beetles.
But as farmers, we're trying to do our bit, getting the soils right so the plants can regenerate, which should help the small animals regenerate, and that will help the owls. So hopefully we are doing a little bit to helping out the owls.
So you see, you can make a difference. But time is ticking away.
At the moment, their population is still going down. We lose a couple of owls every 4 years, and at this rate, there will be no barking owls left in 30 years. And that's not very far away in terms of the whole life of the area.
Like I said before, we've been here for generations and the owls have been here a lot longer than us, but there's a bit of a question mark as to both our futures on this land, I suppose.
When I grow up, I would like lots of barkers to be around.
Betty would like she could come along here because we've got a couple of Auntie Kindness around, and if she likes, she could have one of her favourite dishes, Auntie Kindness.
I know this really good tree that Betty could nest in.
Children gone, they must have flown far from here.
think the future for Betty and her fellow barking owls is in the balance. It's up to us. We can see landholders already doing things to increase the hunting areas for Betty and her fellow owls. And this work is even more urgent as we've lost 60% of the barking owl since the 2003 fires. Every bit of owl habitat is essential.